And for folks who don't know, when Howard talks about teaching in Atlanta, he mentions Spelman College. That's a women's college, historically black college among the HBCU family. And that leads to this, when were you first aware that there was such a thing as a women's movement, which you've written about, and that there were aspirations among women for equal rights and full citizenship in a profoundly sexist country?
That's a very strong statement, Dave.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I forgive you.
Sorry, I passed a billboard on the way here that said lingerie football, so it was... Yeah.
I think I first became aware of the women's movement when, like everybody else, when the women's movement emerged, when women began acting out and speaking out. Although I think I first became aware, before it was a movement, I first became aware of the specific problems of women at Spelman College, because I had women students, and I really hadn't thought much about that. You see, but I remember one of my students said to me one day, one of my Spelman students said to me one day, said, my mother told me, when you go to Spelman, remember this. And a lot of these students came from very poor backgrounds, their parents were tenant farmers or janitors and so on, and they were the first kids who got to college. So my mother told me, remember, you're poor and you're a woman, and you're black. You have 3 strikes against you. So keep that in mind. When she said that to me, the idea, oh yeah, if you're a woman, that's a strike against you. And I hadn't really been thinking of it that way. So, I mean, that's how we learn things, when we encounter people who teach us.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay at Spelman a second, and I want to say some names to the crowd. You may know these names and you may not, but Nagesh Rao, Loretta Capehart, Norman Finkelstein, Joel Koval. And what they all have in common, along with a couple of other professors out there right now, is they've been hounded by David Horowitz and his effort, you can hiss, it's okay, and his efforts to force out radical thinkers off the college campuses. And I wanted to ask you, Spelman and Boston University, how did you manage to stay employed?
By hiding. Hiding my views. No. How did I manage to stay employed? Well, the answer is, at Spelman, I didn't manage to stay employed. I was fired.
A little awkward. Sorry about that.
I was there for 7 years and I was fired. I'm proud. When you're fired, be proud. It means you've done something good. I was fired basically because my students, who had been living in this patriarchy, which was Spelman College, my students came out of jail after sitting in Atlanta, came back to the campus and rebelled against the oppressive conditions of the campus, and I supported them. I was fired. However, there's a little sequel to that. That was in when was it? Yeah, in 1963, I was fired. Wow. A few years ago, I got a letter from the president of Spelman College. Not to say president who had fired me, but the new president, saying, we'd like to invite you to be commencement speaker, get an honorary degree at Spelman College. So I went back to Atlanta. 42 years after I was fired, I was vindicated.
It's like the Gandhi quote, first they do this, then they do this, then they do this, then you win. And then you get to be commencement speaker.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. No, I was better off than a lot of the people who were killed by Stalin, and then they were pardoned. So I was still alive and got my honorary degree. But at Boston University, I survived. Barely. I was threatened with firing. I and 4 others. We were known as the BU5. Never heard of it, huh? I'm really disappointed. The BU5. And with 5 of us, we'd been out on strike. Faculty on strike, secretaries on strike, buildings and grounds people on strike, etc. Been on strike against a very ridiculous administration. Most of them are, you know. And the faculty, they settled strike with the faculty, but not with the secretaries. The faculty went back to work, and a number of us said, no, we're not going back to work. It's secretaries are still out. So, we refused to cross the picket line of the secretaries, and some of us held our classes out on the street on Commonwealth Avenue rather than cross the picket line. But, so we were threatened with being fired by the man who was the president of president of Boston University, who sort of became notorious in the country, John Silber, well, he was called the Idi Amin of higher education. Anyway.
There's a lot of places to go there. That's okay.
Yeah, so anyway, but there was sort of big outcry in our favor. We all had tenure. Well, tenure. We all had tenure. It was not easy to fire us, and finally, they kind of stopped their proceedings. But I say that, in answer to your question. Yeah, 1, I was fired. 2, I was close to being fired. And the truth is, we live in a hierarchical society where somebody has power over our jobs, always, and therefore that's an inducement to caution and compromise. Because sometimes they ask me, how come, the textbooks are the way they are, and the course of it. Everybody is part of this hierarchy where somebody has power over you, and if you step out of line, something may happen to you. So you have to, understanding this, and understanding, sure, you want to survive, but if you only survive, nothing will change. And so everybody, in whatever job you are, you have to take risks, really. Not suicidal risks, but risks. It's we all have to play kind of guerrilla warfare with the system.
One of the exciting campus developments has been that a lot of students of these professors haven't taken this lying down. And it's not just about the professors. A lot of students over the past year, 2 years, have made the decision to occupy buildings, whether around the issue of divestment in Israel or budget cuts or trying to keep a beloved radical professor employed. And on this campus as well, I believe there was an occupation around the war. Is that true? At some point? Okay, good. That's good. Not 68, I mean more recently than that. And I wanted to ask you if you had, because we're taping this, if you had a message for students who were in their own head thinking to themselves, let's see, what am I going to do today? Cafeteria, study hall, or building occupation?
Well, it's interesting. Students want to go to class, they want to get grades, they graduate, they want to get jobs. But students who have stepped out of that role, even briefly, and gotten involved in social movements have never regretted it. Never regretted it. The moments in which students, even for a day or a week, even for a sit-in or an occupation or a picket line or whatever, students who stepped out of their role as student for a while and became activists for the time being, they never regretted it. And they looked back on those days later on as the best education they ever had. I remember at Spelman College when my students were going into town and sitting in and getting arrested, there was a colleague of mine who wrote a letter to the Atlanta Constitution, the newspaper, and he said, you know, I really want to say that I regret the fact that my students are cutting class and they're missing their education. This guy did not know what education was. And the best kind of education you can get is when you're involved in social struggle.